in my last tutorial I got this far and it took about an hour to render, and the reason the render time is so high is because what we're doing is we are rendering with reflection and soft shadows and true ambience all together. Now true ambience is the component of these that requires the raise per pixel to be so high, because that's the only way to combat the noise that's generated by the true ambience effect. But as far as the direct lights are concerned and the blurry reflections, we don't really need the raise per pixel to be that high, but we have no way to control the raise per pixel individually for those effects. Indeed, we have no way to control the maximum ray depth individually for those effects, and if we had additional control over the rendering, we would be able to render more efficiently. So as things stand, the only alternative for us is to break the render up into different components and render those components in their most efficient way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 256 rays per pixel, but only render the true ambience components. So I'm going to turn off reflections, because I know that combining true ambience with reflections slows the render engine down tremendously. We don't need to worry about shadows, because what I'm going to do, if I check out of here, is get hold of our two radial lights, keep the background lights, so we've just got the radial lights that are providing light from either side selected at this moment, and hide them. And so I'm just going to render the true ambience component. A render time for this, well, it's estimating about 15 minutes, but I think we'll find that as it refines its rendering process, it'll come down to about 12 minutes. So I'll just render this out on its own and pause the video at this point. Okay, that's done. Right, now the important thing is, because there was no direct light except that was linked in to the background through the IBL tab, through the include function to the background from the light from inside, the options in the render options here, soft shadows, won't have had any effect. So it won't have produced any load because there were no shadows generated, because there were no direct light sources that were casting shadows. Likewise, blurry reflections, because the reflections were turned off, would not have had any effect. So that wouldn't have been slowing it down, which is why render time was about 12 minutes. We've managed to save quite a lot of time. However, we've missed bits of information out, and those are going to have to be filled in. To do that, turn reflections back on, turn true ambience off this time, leaving soft shadows and blurry reflections checked, lower the rays per pixel to 64, and then I'm going to modify this so we've got our light sources back in. So we're still rendering at a fairly high resolution, but we're not rendering at 256 rays per pixel, we're rendering at 64, and as a result the render time is only about 3 minutes. So what I'm going to do is, so I've stopped that there, what I'm going to do is let that render out, pause the video, and we'll see what that looks like. You can just see the blurred reflections in here on the leg. They're quite subtle, but we're only concerned with subtle effects. What we're trying to do is combine these components together to get back to something like we were before, or even something better, because we've got more control, because we've got two components to work with now in post work. So I'll just pause the video. Here then is the final result, and that's taken 3 minutes to render. So if we take our first render, which took 12 minutes, and the second render, which took 3 minutes, and combine them, that's a quarter of an hour, which is faster, 4 times faster than it was when it took us an hour before, and we have two separate components now. So I'm going to load these into PaintShop Pro 8. Obviously it would be better if I had a package that could handle a higher colour depth, then I would have saved them as HDRI images, but since I don't, I won't, so I won't worry about that. But if you do, do. And so here's my true ambience component. Here's the direct lighting and reflection component that I've created separately. I'll Control C to copy that, and then Control L to put that on a new layer. I don't need that one around now. I'll bring that up so it's close to where the layers are, and then I can look at different ways of combining these. So if I select that, I can choose to combine them in different ways, so I've already got a bit more flexibility. Let's see, I think that screen looks quite close to what I had before. I'll just bring in what I had before. So this was the render that was done all in one go. So obviously it looks a little bit brighter. And the reason for that is the direct lights will have been working with the true ambient light. So they would have been lighting the inside of the background sphere, and some true ambience light would be coming in. If I wanted to simulate that effect, I would have to go back to my TA render that I've just made. So I'll just I'll launch that, and I would have to have the direct lights active but linked in to the true ambience background. So I'll just show you how that would work. So over the head view, the orange light source here is working with the light from inside, and these light sources are also lighting that. But if I select each of these light sources individually, I'll stop it from being hidden, but I'll edit the light source so it includes only the background. And once again with this one, I'll get hold of the light source, I'll make it unhidden again so it's visible, but edit it and include only the background. At this stage then, if I render now, the lighting conditions will have changed because the light sources will be lighting the background sphere, and then they'll be contributing to the light a little bit, so you'll get some additional lighting in there from those lighting the background. Obviously it's not a significant amount, or as significant as it appeared in that other example, but that is a way of doing that. You might have to increase the intensity of these light sources to get them to react more. So if I make the fall off for that none, get hold of this one and make the fall off for this none, then I should provide a lot more light. Yes, that's obviously provided a lot more light in there, and you can see they are having an effect. So some degree of control. I'll go back to linear and I'll increase the value here by a factor of 10 on the diffuse side. We'll see what effect that has. Though I recognise that I am drifting slightly off topic here, but it is an interesting question. So there you go. That's balanced the light out a bit. It's still a bit too intense, but that's a way to provide indirect light from those coloured light sources. As it happens in my example, where was I? Okay, here the reflection will also be contributing. So when you combine reflection with true ambience, because you've got so many additional calculations occurring, you have reflections calculations that are also spawning further true ambience calculations, you have more light capture. So there is a recognisable difference there. So perhaps screening, although it's quite a pleasant effect, that might not be the answer in this case. We could go for something a bit more interesting. So, well, we've got dodge, and that's quite nice. Soft light, but it's a bit dark. But never mind that, we can always modify, and this is where the extra colour depth of saving with either TIFF format, 48-bit or HDRI will come to help you out. So if I go to adjust and I've selected the background layer, I could alter the gamma curves, and that I could lighten the TA influence up, so when it's combined you get quite an even effect. That's quite close to what the screening was like. Or I could adjust the layers, so I could merge all the layers down to one layer and then adjust the lot with colour balance control. There's a fade correction, and in this case this will adjust the colours and increase the contrast at the same time, so that creates quite a nice effect. So that's quite strong. I know it's not very realistic, but we're talking about whether or not realism was the aim before. So I'm just trying different values of that to see what I like. I think I'll settle for that. So there then, with the additional contribution of some kind of paint package that can deal with the different layers, is a way to produce a similar render result, in fact a more controllable render result, in a fraction of the time by splitting the render up into different components. So we've got the true ambient render that required 256 rays per pixel. It took 12 minutes eventually, and then the reflection specular response from the direct lighting with the direct shadows, which took 3 minutes because it was rendered at 64 rays per pixel, because that process doesn't create as much noise as a transience does, which creates the most noise. So by splitting the render up into components and rendering them at different qualities, but not compromising the overall quality of your picture, then you can save a lot of render time. So that's the conclusion of this tutorial.